episode 14 of Law and Batting Order. I'm your host, Tony Iliakostas. Here are some quick hits from the past week. A cult has officially grown up into a Bronco. After visiting the Broncos, Titans, 49ers, and Cardinals camps, four-time MVP quarterback Peyton Manning chose the Broncos as his team for the 2012 season. Peyton and the Broncos agreed to a 5-year, $96 million deal. Not bad considering Peyton is 36 years old. Peyton Manning is coming off an inactive 2011-2012 season after recovering from neck surgery, his fourth one in the span of 5 years. Manning joins the Broncos after they had a miraculous season with Tim Tebow under the helm, so it wouldn't be surprising if Manning continues to lead the team to victory as the team's starting quarterback. Speaking of Denver, Tebow time has come to an end. After the Broncos signed Peyton Manning to be their starting quarterback, Denver put Tim Tebow on the trade block and fished for offers. Within 24 to 48 hours, Tim Tebow was traded to the New York Jets for draft picks. The trade hit a snag after there was a small dispute about a $5 million salary advancement on Tebow's contract. The dispute was cleared up and the trade was completed. The Jets intend to use Tebow as Mark Sanchez's backup quarterback, but they will also use Tebow to run wildcat formation plays under new offensive coordinator Tony Sparano. And who knows, maybe Tebow will compete with Sanchez for the starting quarterback spot. Whatever the case may be, Tebow has hit Gotham City, or should I say, Gotham City. Chipper Jones, the face of the Atlanta Braves for the past 18 seasons, announced on Thursday that he will retire from baseball at the end of the 2012 season. Jones said that he was very comfortable with his decision and hopes to stay with the Braves organization after this upcoming season and to help them out in whatever capacity. Jones in his 18-year career has compiled 454 career home runs, won the 1999 MVP award, and is a 1995 World Series champ. Today's Order in the Court will be discussing the recent punishments that the NFL handed the Saints organization after an investigation revealed that the franchise created a bounty fund between 2009 and 2011. The fund, which was under the supervision of former Saints defensive coordinator Greg Williams, was created as a way of rewarding Saints defensive players for intentionally inflicting injuries on opposing players. I talked about this fund a few weeks ago, and you can see that video by clicking the annotation to my left or by clicking the link below this video. After completing their investigation, the NFL and Commissioner Roger Goodell handed out a series of punishments which included a $500,000 fine against the Saints, an indefinite suspension for Greg Williams, a 6-week suspension for Saints GM Mickey Loomis, a 1-year suspension for Saints head coach Sean Payton, and several draft forfeitures. Earlier this week, I had the privilege of interviewing Scott Andresen, a Chicago-based sports and entertainment attorney who is an adjunct professor at Northwestern University's Graduate Sports Management program and who teaches undergrad at Columbia College. I spoke to him one-on-one to discuss these punishments and the long-term ramifications that these punishments could have on each individual Saints entity punished, the organization as a whole, and even the entire National Football League. Take a look. Today's Order in the Court will be discussing the recent punishment that the NFL handed the Saints organization after they organized a bounty fund between 2009 and 2011. For today's episode, I have the distinct honor and privilege of interviewing Scott Andresen, who is a Chicago-based sports attorney and is an adjunct professor at Northwestern University's graduate sports program and also teaches undergrad at Columbia College. Scott, how's it going? Welcome to Law and Batting Order.
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us. And let me tell you, the Saints have not been acting saintly lately. I mean, they're actually sinners, to think of it. Are you surprised by this punishment that the NFL handed the Saints organization? Just to recap our viewers, if you're not aware, the punishment that the NFL gave the Saints organization is specifically a 1-year suspension for Sean Payton, the head coach of the Saints, an indefinite suspension for Greg Williams, the defensive coordinator of the now St. Louis Rams, a 6-week suspension for GM Mickey Loomis, and also a $500,000 fine for the Saints. So, Scott, are you surprised by this punishment?
Not in the least. Especially as regards Sean Payton, who has been, as you mentioned, suspended for a year without pay. I think the without pay is key because for Sean Payton, at least, that's $7.5 million. No, this is, for a number of reasons, the suspension doesn't surprise me at all. Let's talk about Sean Payton first. First and foremost, Sean Payton lied to the NFL and Roger Goodell. about the investigation in the first place. To my recollection, I don't ever recall the NFL suspending a head coach before, so I think this might have been the first time. Part of that is not only the nature of what was occurring, but the fact that Peyton did actually lie about the bounty program. He said he had no knowledge of it, and then the NFL got a hold of an email from, I believe it was Mike Ornstein, mentioning that, hey, I'm in for $5,000 on Aaron Rodgers. Mm-hmm. And when the NFL handed the copy of the email to Peyton, he's like, oh, yeah, that bounty program. So, that didn't really bode too well for him. Right. As far as the penalties against the GM, the team, and what have you, those aren't surprising either. As far as the team goes, they got hit with $500,000. They lost second-round picks this year and next year. I guess what I would equate it to is almost like an NCAA lack of institutional control. Yeah. I think this is the NFL's way of saying, you're responsible for what happens under your roof. Right. So, no, I'm not shocked in the very least at all about what happened to Peyton. I'm not shocked at all what happened to the team. In addition to the particular investigation here, Roger Goodell has a lot of other things that are coming into play when he's setting this example, and that's exactly what he's doing here, is he's setting an example. First and foremost, again, going back to the fact that he was just not happy about being lied to for 3 years, mm-hmm. That the Saints were doing everything in their power to cover up this investigation. Second of all, the NFL right now is facing, at last count, I think it's like 40 or 50 concussion-related litigations, mm-hmm. Yeah. All of them claiming that the NFL didn't take player safety seriously enough. So for Goodell to come down lightly on a player safety issue wasn't even really possible.
Right, and that's exactly a good point that you bring up, to say the least, because you see Roger Goodell being a very pro-player safety player. You've seen it with all these suspensions with hard hits that you saw with Harrison out in Pittsburgh. Even earlier this season with Ndamukong Suh, who stomped on a Green Bay Packers player and was suspended for 2 weeks. Goodell has always been that pro-player safety commissioner. So, but the problem is that he's always been notorious for handing these suspensions left and right. And of course, it's when warranted. He's not going to just do it out of the blue. So, just to bring up another point, do you think Roger Goodell was too harsh, or was he too lenient in this specific punishment to the Saints? Peyton, Greg Williams may have been the grand orchestrator, so I don't think his was too lenient, but because he's getting an indefinite suspension. But what do you think of the other suspensions? Do you think he was too harsh or too lenient on them?
I think they were entirely appropriate, based on the totality of what we've talked about already. Another thing that we got to keep in mind is that Roger Goodell is running a business. That NFL Shield is worth a whole lot of money. I mean, the NFL generates, $9-10 billion a year in revenues. That's with a B. Mm-hmm. And his job is to make sure that property continues to generate revenues. And television, sponsors, fans, they don't openly embrace a thuggish league full of guys that are either making it rain or putting bounties on players or stepping on people's heads. He's got to protect the business model of the NFL. So I think that came into play in this decision as well.
Sure. So what does Sean Payton's punishment say about the NFL's response to bounty funds in the future?
Well, I think it says a couple things. First of all, it says no more bounty programs. Yeah, I think he made it very clear that he doesn't ever want to see this again, including by issuing an edict after this punishment came out, in which every NFL team has to affirmatively state that there's no bounty program of a similar nature. It also says, don't lie to me. Sure. If we're investigating something, your best hope is to be forthright, forthcoming, and honest with the investigation. And I think at some level it says, don't be stupid enough to do something illegal after we're investigating you. The Saints, Sean Payton, Greg Williams, they all knew the NFL was investigating this matter, and they continued to do it. The level of stupidity there, or the level of just not caring, is kind of curious, to be honest.
Yeah. So, the Saints get the Super Bowl this year in New Orleans. They placed a franchise tag earlier this year on Drew Brees, and in general, they're going to be playing this season without Sean Payton as their head coach. What ramifications do you expect this year? I mean, is this bounty fund going to hurt Drew Brees' chances of returning to the team? Would you expect some fans to boycott Saints games? How about the fact that the Super Bowl is there this year? Would you expect a lower turnout of fans just coming out to one of the biggest games in the entire country?
No. I mean, there's a couple questions there. One, as regards Drew Brees, I mean, ultimately, I don't think Drew Brees is going to make a career decision on where he's going to play based on Bountygate or based on the penalties that have been handed down. He's going to take into consideration a lot of things involving his family, what he's able to sign a contract for, business opportunities. I mean, a lot of those things are going to come into play. I don't think this is going to have any effect. I think where you might see some effect is actually on the field. As you mentioned, you're not going to have Sean Payton for a year. So you're going to have a different head coach and a different offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. I mean, the thing to remember here is Sean Payton was also their O coordinator.
Right.
So you're going to have to fill those slots with somebody. And I think you're ultimately going to see several players on the Saints roster, suspended for 4 to 8 games. Anybody that was partaking in this bounty program, I think you're going to see suspended. So yeah, I think the on-field product for the Saints is going to be hurt this year. And not, to any small degree. I mean, it's going to be a pretty substantial, penalty. As far as the Super Bowl goes, I mean, that's completely unrelated. The only tie with New Orleans is the fact that it's actually going to be in the same city. I think we have to remember that a majority of the people that are attending a Super Bowl probably aren't your Joe Six-Pack fans that live in and around the host city, whether it's New Orleans or Detroit or whatever city happens to have a dome. Sure. You're going to have corporate sponsors. You're going to have, NFL VIPs and staff and generally some higher net worth individuals that can actually afford to go to the game. So no, I don't see any impact on the NFL. And even if some fans said, well, I'm not going to the Super Bowl because of this Bountygate, I assure you there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that would gladly take their spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you there. So under the NFL's personal conduct policy, a player or coach who is suspended for, let's say, any conduct that they committed that's against the NFL's constitution or bylaws, those players or coaches have the right to appeal their case, but that appeal would go directly to the commissioner. What chance, I would not be surprised, though, if Sean Payton or Mickey Loomis appealed their cases, but my question to you is, do you see a successful appeal coming to fruition for either one of them?
I see it more likely that I start as the quarterback for the Chicago Bears this year. I would actually be shocked if they even appealed, for a number of reasons. One, under the rules currently in place, under the NFL personal conduct policy that was put into place, I guess it was back in 2007.
Yeah.
Roger Goodell is judge, jury, and executioner. He's got the absolute power of God when it comes to this matter.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't like he said, oh, wow, there's this Bountygate that I've vaguely heard of. Let's just throw some suspensions out.
Right.
They investigated this thing for 3 years. They've got upwards of 20,000 pages of documents. They've done their due diligence. I mean, they've got all the information they needed, and I'm sure he was very careful and thoughtful when issuing a penalty of this nature, almost an SMU-like death penalty on the New Orleans Saints. Right. He covered all his bases. So for them to come back and say, to quote a few good men, I strenuously object, it's going nowhere.
Yeah.
I think these guys, their best hope at this point is to, do everything they can to mea culpa, to rebuild their reputation, rebuild their image, prove to the commissioner that they are sincerely sorry about what happened, that'll never happen again, and do everything they can to get back in his good graces, especially Greg Williams, who, is on an indefinite suspension and quite possibly could be looking at never coaching in the NFL again.
Yeah, I totally agree. So Greg Doyle from CBS Sports wrote an article about the Saints Bounty Fund shortly after it was found out and it hit the news and all of that. And he had spoken to a judge about the bounty fund, and it was kept anonymous. We don't know who the judge was, but the judge had a little tidbit and said that if he were Greg Williams, he would not be surprised if he would be criminally prosecuted. So criminal prosecution, according to that judge, could be imminent for Greg Williams. You're a sports attorney. You've dealt with litigation left and right. You're a seasoned veteran in this. Would you be surprised if criminal prosecution is in the future for Greg Williams?
I would say a cautious yes. I would be somewhat surprised. And here's why I say this. And actually, this is an issue that was recently addressed by a good friend of mine, Eldon Ham, in a New York Times op-ed piece back March 7th, dealing about criminal prosecutions for on-field conduct. Mm-hmm. United States courts have been generally hesitant about weighing in on on-field or on-ice or on-court matters. They just, their approach has been, let the leagues handle it themselves. We're going to stay out of it. Where it's been a little different, maybe, is to some extent, is up in Canada, where the Canadian courts have been a little more willing to get involved with some hockey incidents, because up in Canada, hockey's not a sport; it's a religion. So I guess they want to legislate their religious activities. Yeah. So I would say no, but here's the problem: you never know when a local DA or a prosecutor or somebody like that is eyeballing a run for political office. They need something high profile to sink their teeth into to get their name out there and show they're tough on whatever the issue is. And, you might get a guy like that who might go after Greg Williams and say, okay, we're going to open up a criminal investigation, if for no other reason than just publicity for the individual opening the investigation. I think it's what we're seeing now with Dick Durbin in the good state of Illinois.
Yeah, and speaking of Dick Durbin, you're an Illinoisian, so let me tell you, by the way, for our viewers, all of Scott's information will be down below in the description box, but I follow Scott on Twitter, and he was irate when the news broke that Senator Dick Durbin wanted to have congressional hearings regarding these bounties, and he's inviting the NFL, and he's even allowing other leagues to be involved in this. Scott, give me your opinion. What's up with this?
Well, I mean, Dick Durbin can do what Dick Durbin does, whatever he wants to do. But being a resident of the great state of Illinois, I know we've got a whole lot more problems that are a whole lot more serious than bounties in professional sports leagues. I mean, good Senator Durbin can spend a lot of time and waste congressional resources far better than investigating this issue. I think it's truly an example of, again, somebody trying to get their name out there to raise their profile. It kind of reeks of the Major League Baseball steroid hearings back in March. I think it was 2005, when all they really wanted to do was parade a bunch of professional athletes in front of them and then talk about how tough they are on steroids. I think it's a complete and utter waste of time. I think there are times when Congress should be involved in sports matters, but this sure as heck is not one of them.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. I mean, this is something that the NFL can handle to a certain extent, and this will be my last question, and this is a nice segue to it. Bounty Fund has now been, I guess, tamed down. It's tame now. It's Roger Goodell has punished Sean Payton, the Saints organization, Mickey Loomis, Greg Williams. All these punishments have been handed out. Now, do you think the next step is the NFL tailoring their constitution and bylaws to contain a specific clause of banned activities like bounty funds?
No, I don't think so. As I mentioned earlier, under the NFL personal conduct policy, Roger Goodell's already got the power of God.
Okay.
The NFLPA, I know at one time, was pushing pretty hard trying to get commissioner decisions of this nature subject to a review by an impartial arbitrator. Throughout the process of collective bargaining, they ultimately did not get that. So for at least the duration of this collective bargaining agreement, this next 9.5 or 10 years or whatever it is, you've got Goodell with the power of God. They don't need to change anything, and in fact, I think the NFL would prefer to have a little bit of flexibility that they do have, in that Goodell could pretty much be very fact specific and do whatever he wants based on the particular circumstances. So no, I don't think there's any need or desire for them at this point to change their governing rules.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what pans out. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe any other teams come out and say, well, we've had a bounty fund too. But, Scott, I really appreciate the time. Thank you for being on Law and Batting Order.
You betcha. It's been my pleasure.
All right, take care. That's a show. Leave all your comments down below, and be sure to visit Law and Batting Order at lawandbattingorder.com, as well as on Facebook and Twitter. Until next time, have a great week, guys.